He begins, as he often does, by quoting from a verse from Tanakh, a verse from the Torah. Tehomot yichasiumu, yardu vimtsolot kamo aven. The deeps covered them. That the word deeps is tehomot. Tehom is a deep or the depth. They sank into the depths like a stone. We see that this is from Exodus chapter 15. And normally, if this was just me learning on my own or learning with the Chavruta, we would take out our Tanachs, our, handy-dandy Bibles, and open up the passage. I put on the table, for people who want, I welcome you to do that. But as a time-saving technique, I also put most of the sources that we're going to come across on this sheet. So the quick background we see for this opening verse is that Exodus chapter 15, which is source 1 on this source sheet, is that this is the Israelites crossing through Yam Suf, crossing through the Red Sea, being chased by Pharaoh and his army, and just as they're going through, the seas crash down on them. And the Torah describes it as Tehomot yichasiumu yardu vimtsolot kamo aven. The deeps, the depths covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. This Torah was taught by Rebbe Nachman on the Shabbat morning that we call Shabbat Shira, the Shabbat of song, because it is the time every year when this section of the Torah, the Song of Miriam, is read, or really sung, in synagogue around the world. So this verse was from that week's Torah portion. And he opens up with it. You can see in the top of this Torah, it's like cited. But guess what? We're going to move away from that verse now, and he's not going to get back to that verse itself into the very end of this Torah, which in this book at least is 30 pages later. It will take us at least a month to get there. But we want to remember that image of falling, of drowning, of water crashing over you, of the deeps, the depths, tehomot. That word in particular, the deeps, the depths, tehom, will be a repeating theme throughout this Torah. And over the course of this Torah, deeps or the depths will come to mean different things. It will have a negative meaning, something that you can drown in or sink in a dark sense. It can have a mystical, a sense of mystical yearning. He's going to quote shortly from Psalms 42, where there is a verse, Tahom el Tahom Koreh, the depths call to the depths, which you could read in many ways. The depths in me call to the depths in you, or the divine mystical depths call to the depths in human, or vice versa. The depths will also, the word tahom, which again here means the deeps or the depths, Rebbe Nachman will beautifully interpret and find a biblical reference to that same word being used to mean, from the book of Ruth, that the people were mystified. Tahom can mean mystified or shocked. So it will have to be mystified, and it will also be a place where rain comes from. So this word will really permeates the Torah. So we want to sort of just be aware of all of those possible resonances. Let's begin. The Torah is divided into passages or paragraphs or pieces. So we start with Aleph, or 1. So this is Torah Tet, Keta, piece, part 1, Aleph. Ki ikar hachiyut mekablin mehatfila. Kamo shekatuv tefila le'el chayai. The essence of life force comes from prayer, as is written, prayer to the God of my life. Let's say that again. The essence of life force comes from prayer. And he cites a proof text. How do we know that that's true? It's easy. It says so in Tanakh. It says in Tehillim. It says in Psalms, in Psalm 42. Tefillah la'el chayai. He connects that set, which means a prayer to the God of my life. Those are just 3 words, tefillah le'el chayai, prayer to the God of my life. But what he does there is he connects thematically tefillah, prayer, to life, chayai, to the God of my life. We could leave it there and simply say, Rebbe Nachman found a great connection, that the word prayer is connected to the word life. And he's going to do a lot of that, of what you could say on its most basic level, you could say is almost a form of word play that he can connect, but it is far deeper than that. If you look in Psalm 42, which we were just singing, from which we were just singing, look what it says in Psalm 42. This is what he's citing from. Ke'ayal ta'arog alafike mayim, like a hind, a deer, a gazelle, crying for water, my soul cries for you. This is written, our tradition tells us, by King David, but I think it could as easily have been, the sentiment is true for all of us. This sense of yearning, deep yearning, thirst. Like if you're thirsty, it's painful for God. We want God, and not just any God. In verse 3, Lekel Chai, the living God. A God which you experience. Not the opposite of living God would be a dead God, which I think that would mean, something distant, foreign, away, that you read about. No, Rebbe Nachman and we want an experience of God in our life. And he says, King David experienced terrible feelings of absence. My tears have been my food. I'm taunted with the question of where is God? And then I put it in bold in the English, verse 8. Again, this word deep, tahom. Tahom el tahom kore. Deep calls to deep in the roar of your cataracts. And then he was quoting from verse 9. By day, may God take care. And so at night, a song to God may be with me, a prayer to the God of my life. So we see, now we get a little context. This Tehillah, this psalm is a prayer, is a hope, is a desperate desire for relationship and connection with God. So when Rebbe Nachman opens this Torah saying that life force comes from prayer, and he cites this psalm, he's giving us a little context into where he's coming from. And where he's coming from is a place of, where is God in my life? I want relationship with God. This is such an incredibly beautiful poem, Psalm 42. Want is a weak word. It's a desperate desire and yearning for a relationship with a living God of my life. Chayai. So Rebbe Nachman says, that prayer is how you get life. He's drawn a deep connection between God, prayer, and life. My life force. So now he goes on. Back to the Torah. Ubishvil zeh, and this is why, tzarich lihitzpalel bekol kocho. A person must pray with all of their might, koach, their strength. Ki kshmitpalel bekol kocho, because when one does pray with all of their might, umaknis kocho biotiyot hatfilah, and enters in their power into the words of the prayer, and not just the words, the letters of the prayer. He's going to go into that more deeply later. Thinking about the actual letters and words of prayer. So we can bracket it for now because he will deal with it down the road. When you can do that and bring all of your energy into prayer, what will happen? Azai, then, nitchadesh kocho sham. Then his energy will be renewed there. What's the there? What's the there? His energy is renewed there.
In his place of prayer?
In his place of prayer, yes. In his life, in the words of his prayer. I think it's a little vague. I think it could hold several of these meanings. But he'll describe more. Bivachinat, this corresponds to, and we'll get in a moment, I'll talk about the word bechina for Rebbe Nachman. Bivachinat chadashim labikarim rabba emunatecha. This is from Eicha, Lamentations. It's the third. It's on your source sheet, source 3. Again, the author discussing what we believe the tradition says is Jeremiah, that I was empty of peace. I forgot what happiness was. I thought my strength and hope had perished before God. But then, ultimately, in this paragraph, in this chapter of Eicha, of Lamentations, the author says, but no, the kindness of God has not ended. God's mercies are not spent. They, meaning the mercies of God, chadashim labikarim, they're renewed every morning. Rabba emunatecha. Great is your, here, this translation says grace. But emunatecha is what? Your modet, which emunatecha means your faith or your faithfulness. And Neil is correct that phrase, Rabba emunatecha, becomes part of the liturgy of the prayer. It is many Jewish people wake up in the morning, and the opening line that they say, Modeh ani lefanecha, I am grateful to you, God, and the full phrase ends with Rabba emunatecha, great is your faithfulness. Why? And you see why, the context of Eicha, chapter 3:23, that it's renewed every morning. So when you wake up in the morning, Baruch Hashem. Thank God I'm alive. Your faithfulness is great. I trusted you. I hoped. When you go to sleep at night, what do? You hope you'll get up in the morning. And I think for most people, when you're younger, you don't have to actively have that hope as much. And as you get older, it starts to be something you think about more. Till when you wake up, every day of my life, this Modeh Ani becomes more meaningful to me.
That's the answer to your question before when you asked about where is there. Prayer is the renewal. It's the waking up. It's the renewal of that energy that Hashem gives. That's Rebbe Nachman. That's his central theme. Is that that's how you get the renewed life. Every moment that you pray, that's when you get reinvigorated with it. It's not a place like over there, but it's a life source.
It seems like that word might be the open from the opening line, chiyut, this life force energy. And I think I like what you're saying, Neil, because it's saying not only is it true when you get up, it's when you invoke when you pray it, you're calling that chiyut into being. So Rebbe Nachman is saying, if you bring all your energy into this prayer to tefillah, you're bringing this chiyut into being. You're calling it into being. Now note that the word in that phrase at the end is emunatecha, your faith, your faithfulness. Emunah, we often translate it as faith. And now Rebbe Nachman will do a little two-step, because he says, right, he wanted to prove to us that if you daven, if you pray, if you speak with God with all of your energy, then your prayer, your tefillah is the way to do that, and it invokes this chiyut. So we maybe would have expected to see the word tefillah, prayer, because he likes proof texts. But he didn't cite the word tefillah, he cited the word emunah, not prayer, but faith. So now he's going to connect and show us that prayer and faith are connected in the next line. Ki emunah hi tefillah. And faith is prayer. Kamosha Katuv, as it says, also in Exodus, Vayehi yadav emunah. And his hands were emunah, were faith. Targumo, which is translated by the Targum Onkelos, which is the side-by-side Aramaic translation of the Torah from the 1st century CE by a convert to Judaism named Onkelos, who translated the verse, his hands were steadfast, to they were spread out in prayer. Now, what's this verse about? It is from Exodus chapter 17. It's in the back of your source sheet. This edition from the Breslov Research Institute has a small error. It says that this is from Exodus 17:2. It is really from Exodus 17:12. And this is when Moshe and the Israelites are attacked by the Amalekites, Amalek, who attack the rear of the Israelites as they're going through the desert. And Moshe goes up to the top of a hill. On one side, he has Aaron, his brother. On one side, he has Hur. And the Torah tells us in Exodus 17:11 that when Moshe would hold up his hands, the Israelites would prevail. But when his hands would go down, Amalek would prevail. But so it says Moshe's hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur would hold up his hands. And here's the key line at the end, Vayehi yadav emunah ad bo hashamesh. So his hands remained steady until the sun set. So that what we would call the pshat reading here of the Torah text is that the word emunah here means steady. His hands remained steady, held up. But Onkelos, the Aramaic translation, when he writes the Torah, he says, no. His hands weren't just steady. They were, in Aramaic, he says, prisan bitzilo, which means spread out in prayer, which understands then this whole scene, not just as Moshe, being a rah-rah leader, though maybe he was that too, but praying, davening.
Did he have the rod in his hand?
Yes, he did. Exactly right. In verse 9, it says, Umateh Elokim biadi, the staff of God in his hand. And by the way, the staff of God, and the notion of the staff will also be a theme that's going to come up in this Torah. So we're going to talk about that.
So Hur was from the tribe of Judah,
Correct.
and Aaron was the high priest, and Moses was the prophet. So you have the prophet, priest, and king working together, holding up the rod.
Very nice. Very nice. That's why you got to keep showing up here.
Hashem.
Now they weren't yet those, interestingly, because there hasn't yet been the priestly investiture
Mhm.
of it. But you're right. That's who those people will become.
Their descendants, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So
What are saying? Aaron was already, he wasn't the Kohen Gadol, but he was still Levites, were still priests from even from the time that they were in Egypt. Even they were still priests.
midrashically,
Right. And
Yeah.
Judah was prophesied
That's-
the scepter would not depart from him.
correct. All that will happen in the Torah text later.
Right.
But yes, correct. So that is paragraph Aleph. Life force comes from prayer. You have to put all of your energy into prayer so that the kindness of God, God's shefa, God's, it seems to be relating, channeling chesed, God's goodness, can be renewed every morning. And that's an aspect of emunah, which we understand to be faith. And Rebbe Nachman has to show us that faith is derived from, is related to this, to tefillah, from this scene in Exodus 17. What would we say are, what are some questions, and not necessarily questions that have to have answers at this point, and maybe better if to ask now are sort of for big questions that we might not have answers to. I'll say one I have at this point would be, what at this point, and he is going to refine the notion a bit as we go, what does Rabbi Nachman mean by tefillah, by prayer, so far? What does he mean by prayer? What could he mean by prayer?
Well, yeah, as you pointed out, he connected faith and prayer. He connected prayer with a relationship, crying out to Hashem. You know,
Great. So it could absolutely, one thing he could mean by prayer at this level is crying out to God, which I think in many ways is in Yiddishkeit, in Jewish thought and being, the sort of primary, the primary level and layer on which any notion of prayer exists. Layer number one is wanting a relationship with God. Great.
Psalm 42 that you quoted with, taking the tradition that David wrote it. Can you imagine the passion that King David had when he wrote that? Of him wanting to communicate with God. And that was. I mean, he was a little kid on the backside of taking care of his father's sheep, but he had that relationship, and God saw his heart. What he, from the time he was young, calling out to God, playing with his harp and those different things, and God saw his heart and just began to elevate him to the place. And his psalms that he wrote have led for many generations people closer to God.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I really want to emphasize most here that especially what's important about 42 is David doesn't feel, he's reflecting on times in his life where he does not feel that connection.
Right. So the undertext is actually the opposite of faith. He's really talking about sinking like a stone, arms going down, where is God? That's actually, and then what's interesting to me is that this notion, you translated it differently from him, and I was curious about the verbiage there, but talk about concentrate the energy into the words. It's sort of metaphorical, not a close translation. You said something like enter yourself.
Yeah, the verb is.
How did you say it?
I was translating as I read from the Hebrew, which is machnis.
Yeah.
Lahachnis is to bring in.
To bring in.
Hachnasat, hachnasat
Welcoming.
orchim, welcoming guests.
Right.
Literally bringing,
Gathering
in.
So the idea is that the words by themselves may be full, they may be empty. In other words, you may read the same word. He's addressing people who pray every day. So the words may lose that energy. Therefore, prayer, because you were asking what is prayer, but he's saying prayer is really bringing your life energy into the words and bringing them to life again, because otherwise they're just sitting there.
Roger is saying, to answer my original question, your answer would be the liturgy of Jewish prayer,
Yes.
which, 3 times a day, and maybe most specifically the Amidah, which is the central prayer within the prayer service.
Mhm.
Because, right, it says be'otiot tefillah, the letters of tefillah, which indicates that he's talking about letters and words that we would all be able to point to in the siddur.
And say over and over.
And you have to bring your energy into those words.
And that's not easy because you've said them over and over.
You're telling me, brother.
It's true, but Rebbe Nachman is tefillah is more than just the Amida. It's a constant dialogue throughout
Right.
the day about every little thing.
That's true.
And I'm not sure I see like internalizing King David, questioning, and trying to come close because he feels far away. I see this as Rebbe Nachman detaching himself from these 3 examples and drawing it back to the very beginning with the Song of the Sea, where you talk about talk about the essence of power, and specifically military power. The Egyptians with their chariots, specifically with their chariots and their horse.
Right.
That is the sign of power. Horses and chariots of power. And the soldiers sink like a stone, which is pretty much the power is completely dethroned of all of their power by something higher than that. And then, of course, with King David, he's looking, where is the power? And King David often in his songs that he wrote is always, from where does the power come? It comes from Hashem, which is very Nachmanesque, of that. And because again, what we started with here, and the whole idea of Pesach and Moshe Rabbeinu with his arms stretched out, it's more of, the way I see it, it's more, where does my strength come from? Mi Adam, Isha Amda, from Hashem. It's up, like when Moshe Rabbeinu holds up his staff and says, look at the snake and they're healed from the venom. Look up, look up, look up. And that is where the power is coming from. It's not from Moshe Rabbeinu keeping his hands up. It's Moshe Rabbeinu holding,
causing the people to look up rather than down.
and then, not only does Moshe Rabbeinu need help, who helps him? You have Aaron, the Kohen, and her propping it up. So you have, and the people, when are they winning? They're winning when they look. It's all about them looking.
Correct.
And looking up. So it's
But-
all about the power, and that the power comes from Hashem, and that is, and that people, if you think that it's people, if you think it's a Amalek, if you think it's the Egyptians, if you think it's, by the sword, and you just trust in the sword, you battle against Amalek, none of that is the true power, and it's all really just from Hashem. And talk about Amunah, everything is from Hashem, and the more you trust in Hashem, the more the dialogue, the closer you get, the more lively Hashem is.
Kind of the cycle that he describes.
Yeah, well, so I don't really disagree with you, but I guess what is maybe more impressionistically, you have the image of people sinking into the depths like a stone, and I'm sort of curious as where he goes to that, because the word depths here, in effect, has a negative connotation, but out of the depths, so it's a rising back. So it seems to me, and then, yes, it's true, he has faith, but the man who's trying to lead everyone else, he can't keep his arms up. His arms are too heavy, they sink. So that's something, to me, that's a very powerful image that has a meaning for Nachman, I think. I mean, he relates to it. I think Nachman, in a certain way, isn't just preaching faith. I mean, of course he is, but he's also speaking to weakness. He's speaking to sinking down. He's speaking to depression. He's speaking to loss of strength, right? Both in the Psalm and in the Torah. And even in a certain way, I agree it's the defeat of the enemy, but it's also a human defeat. It's even, we even know there's a midrash that, what, my children are dying and you're singing. What, in other words, and the ambiguity of the word, the fact that the word depth, and I don't know which depth, techomot's the same
Tehom,
word.
yeah.
Now in this phrase, it has a negative value, right? Because they're sinking into the depths. But aren't we supposed to sink into the depths in order to call to the depths? Don't we have to feel our need from the place of no faith in order to have faith? We can't feel it from the place, oh, everything's, like the person who superficially says, well, I've got faith, everything's hunky-dory, isn't really a Nachman person, because Nachman's really about sinking,
Exactly. It's also it's more
Right?
than sinking. It's more about rising.
Well, you can't.
But you can't.
It's a total dialectic.
You can't. What is it?
It's more about increasing tefillah, increasing.
Well, you see, I'm just on the other side of it. But you see, it's a cycle, isn't it? You can't rise if you never sank. So, and I'm just saying the subtext is different from the text. So,
Well, that's. I
right?
mean, what's amazing to me about this
Yeah.
opening passage
Yes.
is he cites
Right.
the part of the Torah that he cites, that is cited in the Torah,
Yeah.
are very positive.
Right.
God is chadashim labakarim. God renews in the morning.
Right.
God is tefillah la'el chayai. God is the prayer of my life.
Excuse me, if you say renews in the morning,
That
doesn't that
indicates a
implies that it sank in the night?
And if you just look in the texts themselves that he's citing from,
Yeah.
the surrounding verses
Yes.
are about not having the absence and needing to call out.
Right.
So it's of course it is this kind of cyclical.
But isn't the sinking like being in this world, and that when you're sleeping, you're in the higher world. You're with Hashem. When you're sleeping, you're with Hashem. When you wake up, you find yourself right back down here, and that you have to rebuild through tefillah, through moda'ani, through amunah, in order to get back.
Well, no, but I mean, there's also the idea that sleep is 1/40th of death, and that actually, when you're sleeping, it's a form of death. Also, I mean, it's hard to have an argument in Judaism, right? Because everything.
A lot you could marshal.
Yeah.
All right, I want to begin paragraph Bet, which is lengthy. So I'd like to begin it today. So we're on the bottom of page 82.
All right.
Vida, and know, a common refrain of Rebbe Nachman. This is something you got to know. Da. Sheyesh 12 shvatim. There are 12 tribes. Kneged 12 mazalot, corresponding the 12 constellations. V'kol shevet v'shevet yesh lo nuscha miyuchedet. Every tribe has their own, either you could say individual version of the prayer, but that word nusach will be familiar to some people. It's the word we use to describe different nowadays melodies and actually versions, because there's word differences and orders of the prayers between different groups of Jews, typically based on where they are from. So we at Congregation Beth Israel, our Siddur, our prayer book, is Nusach Ashkenaz. It is to use the language here, it's the version of the prayer that was formulated and developed in Europe and Eastern Europe. But there's another synagogue close to us that uses Nusach Sfard. But that's not, and then there's another one, but that's not Nusach Sfaradi, Sephardic, or Nusach of say again? There's the Nusach Ha'ari, the Rab Yitzchak Luria's Nusach. There's Nusach of Edot HaMizrach, the version of the Eastern communities, which is the North African and Arabian Peninsula Jewish communities. There's the Polish Nusach. There's the Indian Nusach. There's so that's what it is nowadays.
Right.
But what he's referring to, and this is an idea in the Zohar, is that originally the 12 tribes each had their own. So the tribe of Gad, the tribe of Asher, the tribe of Zvulun, they all had their own unique liturgy. This isn't a value statement. No one was better or worse than the other, though you can imagine that the Yissachar Jews would look at the Naphtali Jews and say, "Oh, can you believe they put Ashrei first?" It's unbelievable. But each had their own, and not only that, V'yeshlo, and now we turn to page 84, which should be on the back of the first page. V'yeshlo shar miyuchad likanes derech sham tfilato. Not only that, but they had their own gate for which their prayers would enter. Now, what's the gate? There's a lot we have to say here. So there was 12 tribes, and each had their own constellation. Now, what do we do with that? So I handed out, hopefully most people should have gotten, if you haven't already, this sheet, which at the top says chapter 5. And this is a picture taken from Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is an early Jewish mystical, Kabbalistic, you could say, work. Our tradition says it was authored by Avraham Avinu, and describes, much of it describes is creation, both the original primordial creation, but also the way in which the universe is constantly created and recreated by God. And there's a lot of different diagrams in it, and there's a lot we could talk about. I pulled out one which shows you the connections between each tribe and each constellation. And I wrote, you can see the third level has the different tribes, and it lines up with the different constellations, and zodiac is the word I was looking for. Now, by the way, if you were to compare this, go online and look for other ones of these, you might find other schemas where different months line up with different tribes. Why? Because Sefer Yetzirah, there are, I think, 4 or 5 different versions of it. There's one called the Sefer Yetzirah of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, has a version that he kind of edited, and there's another famous one, which the name will come to me, which is different. So I would say for now, for our purposes, we don't have to get too hung up in exactly which tribe goes with which. But the point is, there is an idea in which, let's just look on this chart. So you can look at the top one, just for ease. The third ring says Reuven. Reuven, the tribe of Reuven, corresponds at the bottom with the constellation, the zodiac sign of the Tle Aries. So Aries, which is Mars, the planet we know as Mars. And by the way, the fourth rung, which I did not translate, is the months, because they also correspond with each month. So the fourth rung is Nisan, the month of Nisan. You might know that what happens during Nisan? Passover. So, and it's not a surprise because Aries, Mars, is March, and Nisan is in the March-April calendar generally. So what's Rebbe Nachman saying? That each tribe has its own constellation, and it's a gate through which their prayers enter. Now let's just read one more line. V'chol shevet ma'orer b'tfilato koach mazalo sheb'shnei masar mazalot. So, each tribe has its own language of prayer. And when that tribe davens, prays, that prayer goes up through its particular gate, and it touches or interacts or ignites the power vested in that particular constellation. So you can imagine on some level, however you imagine this, Reuven, the tribe of Reuven, they daven in their liturgy, their particular language, which could mean it was in Hebrew, but the words looked a certain way, or they had their own intonation or own songs, and that would go up to the heavenly spheres and ignite, or the Hebrew here is me'orer, which means to awake. Like from the Kabbalat Shabbat, we say uri, uri, awake, awake. So that their prayers would wake up or ignite or raise up the power vested in this constellation. However we understand that, we're going to talk more about that as we go. V'hamazal me'ir lamata, and that constellation, in turn, radiates downwards. The Hebrew is me'ir, which literally means shine. The constellation radiates or shines back down. Umigadel hatzemach, causing the vegetation, ushar dvarav hatzrichim elav, to grow, causing whatever is needed by the tribe of Reuven to grow. So, what he seems to be describing is a process whereby this particular shevet, this particular tribe, by the way, shevet is another word for rod or staff. This particular tribe davens in their particular language. That davening goes up to the whatever heavenly sphere or area or part of God, which is associated or affiliated or understood to be related to one of the zodiac signs, one of the constellations, and that power goes back, radiates back to Earth, which helps whatever we need come into being. That can be vegetation, we need things to grow, but he also says, shar dvarav hatzrichim, whatever you might need. So very similar to what we described in the last paragraph, there's a cycle being described. Our prayers go up and then come back down.
Can I ask you a question quickly? There's a time of the year when the Jews would be praying for the rain and different things like that. Would that have a connection with that?
The answer, it's a great question, and the answer is seemingly yes. We could go through the Jewish calendar, and very clearly the rainy season and the dry season, and not only that, the time of birthing of sheep and goats had a very particular season, and we know that there was a time in the year, the first of Elul, was when the tithing of the yearlings, which is the sheeps and the goats, would come. So that's when they were born, a year later. So that there's a time when we're supposed to pray for fruit trees. Where this week is going to be the new month of Shvat. And on the 15th of Shvat, which is a Jewish holiday called Tu B'Shvat, that is a time when we would tithe fruit trees, because the rabbis tell us it's just at the point when the sap in the land of Israel starts to go up in the trees, because we're at a certain point in the rainy cycle. So that's a long-winded way of saying absolutely. There's a whole Jewish calendar cycle about when we want rain, when we want dry. But I think it's even more particular here, because remember that in the biblical understanding of the apportionment of the land of Israel, the 12 tribes each have their own assignment in the land of Israel. And some of the tribes lived in drier climates, and some lived in warmer climates. Some lived in more mountainous, some lived in the lowlands, some lived on the ocean. Some were were understood as sailors. Some were understood as traders, traders. So I think it's what you're saying, Fritz, and it's even more because every tribe had not only the needs of the collective in mind, but they had their own individual, we need wheat, you need fruit, they need fish. And they also had in mind we know there was a lot of trade with the Phoenicians. We see in that King Solomon, when he built the temple, a lot of the temple was built through things that were traded up from Lebanon and Syria. So we wanted stuff to go well with the cypress trees. So it's both as a sort of general idea, but also very specific. He seems to be saying both are happening. What does it mean to say that, as he says here, the constellation radiates down and causes vegetation to grow? What do we do with that? So he is going to talk a little bit more about that, and he doesn't bring this into this Torah, but folks might know, and it's worth knowing, that there's a lot of rabbinic literature on astrology and the degree to which the Jewish people believe in astrology and understand themselves to be bound by astrology. There is a famous Talmudic idea of Ein Mazal LeYisrael. Mazal means constellations, but it also can mean luck. We say Mazel Tov. But the understanding of Ein Mazal LeYisrael is understood generally as the Jewish people, at least, aren't bound by astrology. So that seems to. So what is this Torah doing then in saying that indeed there does seem to be an effect of astrology and the mazalot? And yet there's another Talmudic saying that says someone who's born during the sign of, actually the example we gave, of Aries, of the Tle, of Mars, which was considered to be Mars was associated with military violence. The rabbis say someone born in that month should become a shochet, should become a ritual slaughterer. Why? The understanding is it's not limited to that. They also, commentaries say, anything that has to do with blood that's positive, like a surgeon or a shochet, a butcher of food. Why? The understanding of that Gemara there is that someone born in that month will have a proclivity, even a Jewish person, the understanding is, will have a proclivity to blood. So better they get into a profession that's positive.
Right. That could fall on the Levites because they dealt a lot with blood. And
So then there's actually a lot of things that deal with blood that are positive and a lot that are negative. So maybe that Gemara is saying that really you're not limited and you're not bound by astrology. So my point is that Rebbe Nachman is working within a frame of reference where our tradition is very rich in discussion about astrology and mazalot and our relationship with that. And there's going to be a specific story with Abraham and the stars,
right,
which he will get to near almost the very end of his Torah. So we'll talk about that when we get there. So now he's going to talk about a different reference to the stars, and this will be the last paragraph that we do this evening. V'zeh perush, and this is the explanation of the following phrase. Darach kochav miYaakov v'kam shevet miYisrael. A star will come out of Yaakov, out of Jacob, and a tribe will stand up out of Israel. He is going to be really into this word here, stand up. And he's connecting a lot of things here. Now, what is this, by the way? If you want to look on the source sheet, it's source 6. This is from the story from Parshat Balak in Numbers. The prophet of Bilam is hired to curse the Israelites. But whenever he tries to curse them, what happens? A blessing comes out of his mouth. He can't help but bless them. And here, the blessing he says is, that's being cited by Rebbe Nachman, is Darach Kochav Miyakov. A star will rise from Jacob, and a tribe, again, which can mean a scepter, stands up out of Israel. And so what's he doing? Again, in terms of the word connection element, what Rebbe Nachman is noting, he's been talking about stars, and he connected star to the Jewish people, Yaakov. Yaakov is Israel. Yaakov is Israel. And a tribe will stand up out of Israel. But now you could just take that as poetic language. It's a repetition of the idea of things that will emerge. A star will emerge and a tribe will emerge. But he says, no. It's very specific. The word for emerge is kam in Hebrew, which is the verb lakum, which means to stand up, literally. And he says, he focuses in like a laser on this word kam, to stand up. Why? Look what he does. V'kam ze b'chinat amida. Kam, lakum, is related to very similar to another Hebrew word, amida, la'amod, which also means to stand up. But the amida is a reference not just to any standing up, but the standing up of prayer. As we mentioned, the central prayer in Jewish life, the central standard prayer, is called the Amidah, the standing prayer. So look, he's done an amazing thing. He's intimated a reference to prayer in the curse/blessing of Bilam. And not only that, he's connected that intimation to tribes. So he says, look at this curse/blessing of Bilam. It's an obscure reference that tribes pray. Just so you know, he then cites a Talmudic passage which proves that the Amidah means prayer. Does he to be the I only see it in the
note as a footnote.
I see it in the
English.
In the English, right? It's a note. It's not in the Hebrew. That's why I was getting confused. Okay, so in the English, he references, the editors reference that Amidah means. There's the Talmud in Masechet Brachot, which I brought on the source sheet, source 7, makes a connection that it says that Avraham, when he went to survey the devastation of the cities of Sodom v'Amorah, it says, V'yashkem Avraham b'boker el hamakom asher amad sham. Avraham got up in the morning to the place where he had stood before God, and standing, when it says that Abraham stood there, that's a reference to prayer, which the Gemara connects to somewhere else, to Tehillim, to Psalms. The point is, what the editors are showing us that Rebbe Nachman means is that when Bilam says a tribe will come up, that's a reference to prayer. The tribe will pray because standing, kam, is like Amidah, the Amidah, the standing prayer. So what does it mean? Here we go. When a tribe of Israel stands up to pray, through this it arouses the star. It arouses the star, and the star steps forth and strikes the thing to make it grow. And how does he know this? He cites a beautiful midrash, a rabbinic idea, commentary, story. Ein lecha esev milamata she'ein lo kochav umalach milamala. There is not even a blade of grass below that does not have a star and an angel above it, which strike it and tell it, Gadal, grow. It's an incredible, beautiful midrash, that if you go outside and you look at a blade of grass, insignificant, you would think, insignificant. You could think maybe, oh, okay, nice, good cypress tree. Now that's godly. No, even grass has its own unique connection to the heavens, to God. And specifically, a star and an angel. Those two words, kochav umalach. He's introduced the word angel. Up until now, he had just been talking about stars and constellations, but he adds now the angel above it. So he's outlined a 3-tiered system, which he will make explicit later in the Torah, that you've got this world, us, plants, stuff. You've got another sphere, which he's using this. I find myself mirroring this vertical metaphor. There's other metaphors to think about God and the divine, but this metaphor seems to be the world, and then above or outside of that, or up, because he's talking about up and down, there's the heavenly sphere of the constellations, the zodiac, and then above that or outside of that, there's malachim, angels. So this process, which he's described, and he's fleshed it out a bit now, there's prayer, there's life force, there's faith. That's one kind of cycle, internal cycle, however you want to move your hands. And now there's this cosmic cycle of prayer, constellations, angels, back down to us again and our needs, and the function of the tribe and the function of prayer working within all of that. Let's pause there with the Torah, and we can talk, but I think we won't go further in the piece for now, because the next thing he's going to talk about is heavy. Fritz.
So you mentioned the blades of grass and the stars, the connection there. On the third day of creation, there was all the plant life, and on the fourth day was the stars and the constellation. So that would kind of go along the lines of what you're saying a little bit.
That it's sort of going from earth to out.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice.
Wow.
That's nice. Yeah, I think I think there's a lot. This piece can hold, I think, a lot of different understandings of the cosmic creation, to very much to live to existential experience. My personal, Gabe, me, you, your experience of prayer, how we see things functioning in our world, how we think God and the divine and the spheres operate. I think those are all happening here. Beautifully.
So he moves Aleph, very personal, right? Human weakness is the undertext, in my opinion. This second, he moves to the cosmic. And just by saying da, he doesn't, it's not clear to me. I mean, I'm not saying he's unclear, but it's not clear to me. How do you get from Aleph to Bet here? Because Aleph is all about human beings praying or not being able to pray, or praying from the depths, or cycling up. All of a sudden it's about oh, when you pray, you activate a star which shines on a blade of grass and causes it to grow, essentially. So that, in other words, your prayer is actually cosmic in its effect. Like your little prayer actually activates this entire process of life that's very, very big. I mean, it's an interesting contrast between the two. It's like they're almost two different ways of. The first is very human and individual in a certain way, and the second is cosmic.
And what I hope, and one of the things one of the major reasons we're doing this Torah is I hope that this, so far as a reader, the hope is that your curiosity is piqued. Mm-hmm. What's he going to do with that? How is he going to bring those together?
Right.
And he will, but not before he makes an even bolder claim, which is that our prayers actually, kivyachol, as it were, affect God. Because what he's talked about so far is stars and angels.
Right.
So if you're willing to accept that, accept whatever that means for now, he's going to make the most bold claim, which is that we can not only have a relationship with God, which we seek, but that it can be on some level a two-way street.
So can you explain? So if the notion is, it's interesting. It says strikes, right?
Yeah.
And then tells, strikes it and tells, strike and tell it, and it's also star and angel. So it's almost like the star strikes with its light, and the angel tells it with its voice. I mean,
that's nice.
There's a parallelism there, right? And so that the angel's interesting because, in other words, why does it he looked at it distantly, you could say, well, why do you need the angel here? Because you have the star strikes it and it grows. We understand that. Why do we need the angel to tell it to grow? They're two different. Are they two different ways of understanding the same process, or are they two parallel processes?
Yeah, great question. I don't know. I know that elsewhere, this notion of what a malach is, which malach means angel. So, bracketing this Torah for a second, major question in all of Jewish thought. What is an angel?
Right.
And it seems to mean different things in different places, and certainly different people understand it differently. But even in this Torah itself, the editors note that he might be referring to Rashi in two different places. Rashi, the great medieval commentator that Rebbe Nachman was well aware of, describes malach in different places as an external force, and he also uses it once as a synonym for seichel, which means intellect, which itself could either be an internal human, or there's also the divine seichel, the external. So I only mean that to agree with you and echo the question.
Well, the other thing that occurs to me is the notion that, when we look at it from our scientific point of view, the sun shines on the grass and the grass grows. There's a thing called photosynthesis. We understand this, right? And we even understand a little bit of how it works pretty well. And so it doesn't require agency. It doesn't require prayer. It doesn't require an angel. It does require a star. Maybe not the star he's talking about, but it does require a star.
Rabbi Nachman would say that it does require all of the above, because it's at the very beginning, the origin of it all. And the continued sustenance is all from that life force. And you've got the two worlds, the world that we live in, the world above us, Shemayim, where Hashem and the angels are, and that they mirror. That's always a constant in Chassidus, that the two worlds mirror each other. That angels are singular in their jobs, and that sometimes their jobs are just to specifically remind. They're sent from Hashem because they don't do anything without Hashem wanting to. It's just as grass and animals and other people have this free will that we kind of fight ourselves.
Right.
But, everything else in the world does exactly what Hashem wants at exactly that time, and we pray down here in our world, has the impact up there. That Hashem then shines the light down, and the angel reminds the blade of grass. They prayed. You're supposed to do your job. Your job is to grow. That's your only job. Just grow.
So it's interesting because he says, when a tribe of Israel stands up to pray, it thereby arouses a star, and the star steps forth and strikes things to make them grow. No angels mentioned. So he describes it, first of all, as that our prayer activates the star, and the star comes back down to make it grow. Our participation's needed, right, to activate. Otherwise, it doesn't just happen the way our current cosmology tells us, right? Our current cosmology says no.
Us down here, we impact
Right.
up there, which comes back down to us.
Right. But there's no angel mentioned in that. The angel's added in from the brachot, from Rishit Rabbah.
Right.
But it's not in his argument. I mean, that's all I'm trying to say.
Unless you say that the angels and stars are.
Well, that's what is the relationship? That's what I would understand.
Yeah, he is going to, it is notable that he doesn't say that first, especially when he's going to cite this thing, which is going to say it explicitly. So it is interesting. He will, I don't know if he's ever going to fully answer that, and he's also then, later in the Torah, he's going to use a different metaphor to describe the three levels. So it's a good question. He'll also use a metaphor that he says it explicitly. He's going to use the word this is at the end of paragraph 2.
Yeah.
If you can see in your book, it's on page 90. He's going to talk about the word Shem, which means a portion. He notes that the word Shem is it's too far ahead, I think. In the Shem can also be seen as the Roshei Tevot, the Shin Kaf Mem. What do you call the?
Well, I understand.
The
abbreviation.
Abbreviation for Shafel Kochav Malach, lowly star angel.
Oh, okay.
So here he does use that. So he seems to like the three-tiered thing. Why he doesn't say that first, unclear. And then your further question of striking versus speaking, I don't know. And by the way, I was interested. I'd heard this midrash before many times, but I'd never actually seen it inside, meaning I'd never actually read it. And I had always been told it in my mind, in my memory. It was always that the angel. It was a much sweeter image.
Just grow.
And it's whispering in its ear, grow. And this is still, I still find this a beautiful image, but the striking.
That's what I was talking about, that word striking.
Yeah.
But
it is striking. Makeh means strike, we're talking about the 10 plagues. It's the Eser Makot. So there is a almost violent.
So maybe the thing about it is light, photons have pressure. So
Is that true?
Absolutely, yes, and enormous pressure in groups. So they do strike. I mean, that's the whole point of the particle wave thing. They do strike. Not that perceptible, but So it's not inaccurate. It's also true that we talk to plants; they grow better. So there's pieces of this that are in our. I mean, I like to think about that.
Yeah, sure.
There are pieces of that are also acceptable in our current understanding, in our scientific understanding.
Yeah, very nice. I hadn't thought about.
I read consciousness has an effect on plants.
Yeah.
Human consciousness has an effect on
the
plants.
life of plants.
So if you pray for your plant, it actually does grow better.
I'd like to mention something, Rabbi, in connection with that. We talked about the stars and the diagram that you have here and the different constellations.
Yes.
And Israel is likened to stars with Yosef
Yes.
and his dream
Yes.
that has
11 stars.
11 stars bowed down to him.
Yes.
And then also in the next thing when he came and made his brothers mad, he said, well, we're binding sheaves in the field.
And they stood up.
And yours, mine was up and yours
Mine
bowed
stood
down.
up.
So all of that connection.
I wonder if it's the same stand up.
It is.
It is.
It's calm.
It's
It's calm, which is one of the verbs. I'm pretty sure it's calm, and not amid. Now, Fritz, you're referencing something that no one mentioned, and I think there's one of the tensions in what we've read so far is the tension between unity and diversity. And in Jewish life, there's a big emphasis on talking about Jewish unity. And the word, people will say, achdut, which means for achdut.
Impossible dream.
Right. I have a dream. I have a dream of a Jewish
That's right.
unity.
Okay, good.
We're here on MLK Day. By the way, I
Right.
should note that both Martin Luther King Jr. and Rebbe Nachman died at the very young age of 39.
Yeah.
Some people say Rebbe Nachman was 38. Some say he was 39. For
Sorry.
for the purpose of that, I'll say go by the one who says 39.
Okay.
But we talk, and that's a big thing people strive for. Of course, often the people who most make the claim for Jewish unity, often those people are the first in line to bemoan what other Jewish people do or disapprove of. But this text, romanticizes a time when there were 12 tribes that were different from one another.
Different music.
Different music, different language. And it says that's the ideal.
Right.
And they each had their own gate. And it was the whole cosmic system was based on 12 different groups. And there's a lot, but wait, I would think maybe you could say, my Hava Amina, maybe I would have thought that the ideal is what? One group.
Mm-hmm.
One Jewish group. You could say an ideal is one world community. This is saying, no, even within the Jews, 12 different groups.
Right.
Now, bracketing, and another question is, which he'll get to, is you might know that we do not know what the tribes were lost or mixed up. That's the 10 lost tribes. Some groups claim they are one or another of those lost tribes. And by the way, the word lost, I don't really like using the term lost tribes. They weren't lost. They were killed, forcibly assimilated, exiled, raped.
Does Rebbe Nachman think that they're hiding on the other side of a mountain or the other side of a river someplace?
And not in this Torah. In this Torah, Rebbe Nachman thinks that those 12 tribes are in this room,
Right.
and that actually one day we'll know.
Who's who?
I was Naphtali, you're Yehuda, that Rebbe Nachman, in this Torah, Rebbe Nachman thinks we'll find that out. But
When Messiah comes,
he's going to this is going to get into,
We'll sort it out.
this is going to get messianic.
Right.
So he thinks, and by the way, how will the Messiah know?
Smell?
By smell,
Fragrance.
fragrance. That's why I'm going to ask for next time, I'm going to need everyone to not shower between now and next time, so that we have our,
You'll be sorry.
we'll have our,
That's not happening.
I want you to have your real scent, so that but when the Messiah comes, through the force of our learning next time,
If you guarantee he's coming next week, then
I will say it's not a guarantee, but it's a strong,
all right.
strong. We'll talk. Anyway, so that's interesting. But then I say all of that because Fritz is noting a time in Jewish history, in the Joseph story,
Right.
where there was
And
internecine tension
right.
in between the tribes. So not only was there a division of 12 tribes, which you might have thought was problematic, but he is holding up romantically. Even within that, there was a time when there was fighting. And what Rebbe Nachman will note is that Jacob, Yaakov, who he's already referenced once and will reference more, the father of the 12 tribes, according to that, and I think it goes exactly with what you're saying, Fritz, represents the unified root. I'm doing root up top. Normally we think root at the bottom, but he was in a tree. He's at the top. He becomes the unified root of the 12 tribes before they fight, like in the Joseph story, and certainly before they dissipate, like in Jewish history. So that is all happening. Friends, let's pause here. An honor and a pleasure learning with you. We'll pick up next week with the next paragraph. If you'd like to take anything home, please do. If you want to leave things here, you can do that, and I will hold them for next time. Thank you.
I marked a few things on.
Do you know how